Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my panelists today, where we are going to be discussing the very famous EB5 visa program, allowing investors to dive into the opportunities of the United States of America. So let us begin with you, Mr. Hogan. I would like to ask you why an investor should opt for the EB5 visa program as opposed to other programs out there.
So really kind of a straightforward question with a straightforward answer. The reality is that this is one of the best ways to be able to predictably immigrate to the United States. If you're a family, you're wanting to give your kids opportunity in the United States. If you're a student and you want to remain in the United States and not be tied up in the H-1B program and have permanent residency in the United States, this is a great program for that. There's programs that are similar to it all around the world. Another great feature of this one that is a little dissimilar from the other programs, if you pick a good regional center, you pick a good project, you actually get your investment money back. So you're not simply buying a piece of real estate and then holding that real estate. You're making an investment that has to create new American jobs. There's requirements for it, but you can get it back at the end of the day and then also achieve that immigration goal by getting that permanent green card.
Okay, so tell me about the key aspects of the EB5.
Sure.
Give us some background information as to what it really is.
Yeah, so it's the EB5 program was established back in 1990, so it's been around for a long time. A couple years after that, they established the Regional Center program. The Regional Center program is primarily the majority of all the EB5 investments in the industry, and really what all of us up here are promoting. And what that is it requires that an investor make an investment at $1,050,000 or an $800,000 minimum investment if the project's located in what's called a targeted employment area. Now, this is a rural area or an area of high unemployment, or an investment into an infrastructure project, which is a little, less, the least utilized aspect of the program, I would say. Now, what it requires is not only that you make that investment, but that investment lead to the creation of 10 new American jobs. So once your investment is made, it's made fully at risk. It's in this project that can create those jobs. You've demonstrated to the government that you can create those jobs through a couple of different visa applications. You can become eligible for that green card, which is permanent residency. So it's not citizenship. It's not the purchase of citizenship or the purchase of permanent residency. You have to earn this through the creation of these jobs and checking all these boxes.
Okay, perfect. And after how long can you obtain this green card?
So the times vary pretty widely, and they have over the years. And so I've been with CMB since 2011. When I joined, our company was outraged because processing times had jumped all the way up to 3 months. And shortly thereafter, processing times could get longer. 8 months, 9 months, 10 months to a year. Before 2022, processing times had kind of gotten out of control. It was taking investors a long time to get approval of their initial petition, and then even longer in some cases to get a visa or the removal of those conditions in their final visa stage. And sometimes it would take investors 6 or 7 years to get through those if there was no visa backlog because of how long the processing times would take. But in 2022, they reformed the program through a piece of legislation called the EB5 Reform and Integrity Act of 2022. And what they tried to do is streamline the process. So now there's different ways in which you file a petition. The government's looking at your personal information after the project that you've invested into has been approved, rather than looking at the project every time with every individual investor's petition. And we've seen adjudication times come down dramatically. So we've seen projects get approved in as little as a month, which is crazy. It's an outlier, I'll tell you that. Typically, we're seeing them get adjudicated in somewhere in that 6 months to a year period if they are high unemployment area projects. Rural projects get adjudicated a little bit faster than that. And then individual investor petitions. If you invest into a rural project, you can be eligible for priority processing. And those times we've seen them vary, but I think people are seeing those get adjudicated within a few months after the project gets approved. On the high unemployment area projects, Similarly, you have to have the project get approved first, but then we're seeing those individual investor petitions get approved somewhere in the year timeline, year to 18 months timeline. Now, I'm always going to give you conservative numbers. I'm never going to give you the outlier and tell you that's what the processing time is. It's important that when you go into this, you realize that there's a timeline associated to it, and so you have to be patient. There's not really anything that the regional centers can do to impact that timeline other than making sure that you have all the information you need to file.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Matt. And I guess the regional centers can facilitate that and make the time, facilitate in the sense that maybe save time for some investors. Yeah.
Just one more thing on that, and I won't want to eat up all the time here, but the regional centers are important because they're structuring these petitions, they're filing the individual project petition, but they also have to make sure that when that petition's filed, it's checking all the boxes in the program, and that when you're filing your individual project or your individual petition, it's getting associated to that project petition. So you want to make sure that you're investing into something with a regional center that knows what they're doing, and it's more likely than not to get approved, or else you start that process over again. The regional center is really going to provide you with a lot of guidance in terms of how that works. More importantly, the immigration attorney that you're going to select is actually the one who's going to prepare and file that petition for you. So people like Ignacio are going to, you're going to be in good hands with someone like that with a lot of experience.
Right, and that actually leads me to my next question about, selecting a good regional center. So what is the role, Akshat, of a regional center, and how do we best pick the regional center that's right for us?
Sure. So you would typically look at a regional center as a fund manager or an NC issuer. The role of a regional center is to look out for good, solid EB5 projects in the market. Now, when we say good, solid projects, you're looking at partnering with developers that have a good track record, good history, people who've known to complete their projects, repay their intercreditors on time. From an immigration standpoint as well, a regional center has a lot of responsibility in ensuring that there's enough job creation that takes place in any project, because at the end of the day, investors will get their permanent green cards only when their investment creates a minimum of 10 jobs per investor application. So kind of projects, what are the capital structures like, what's the kind of project that you're looking at? These are sort of factors that you would want to cater to as a regional center when you're looking at projects in the industry.
Okay, and explain to me, why are they called regional centers? Is it?
So again, in simple words, you can call us a fund manager. I think it's probably a terminology that people liked for us to be used, but there's nothing fancy about using a regional center tag. I mean, anyone else can correct me if I'm wrong. It's just something that we're known to be in the EB5 space or industry.
Okay, and how can we here best identify good regional centers?
Sure, that's a good question. Whenever an investor's filing an EB5 petition, they're pretty much partnering with the regional center, and it's a relationship of up to 4 to 5 years. Ideally, you want to work with someone who has a great track record, so someone who's worked in this space for a long time, someone who's known to repay on their projects, take care of the investors. It's also people who put themselves out there for investors. So you need to understand what is the requirement of the investor. As Matt said, that there are different types of projects, certain rural projects, high unemployment area projects. So as a RC representative, you need to really understand what is the requirement of your client. At times, probably be honest to them and tell them you're probably more suited for a rural project, considering that your child might age out as compared to a high unemployment area project, and vice versa. Because, I don't think we get these questions enough or more often, that someone wants a delayed green card. But at times there are certain requirements like these as well. So understanding all of those aspects, understanding how long have they been into this space are things that probably investors might want to look at when selecting a regional center.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Akshat. Sebastian, let's talk about the citizenship and immigration services. So how do regional centers ensure compliance with these regulations, with the immigration regulations?
Sure. So I would start by adding perhaps something also to what Akshat just said and Matt. To the extent that you're starting to look at EB5 for the first time now, I would say that the industry as a whole has never been safer, okay? As Matt touched on, there was a reauthorization of this law. This law is 35 years old, but there was a reauthorization only 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And in that reauthorization came a whole slew of requirements on regional centers that made it more difficult, more expensive, but frankly better for investors from the regional center perspective. Regional centers have to now use fund administrators, get audited. Some groups, CMB being one, Pine State another one, have been audited for many years already. But generally speaking, this really foisted upon in regional centers a lot more government oversight. And it's weeded out, I would say, a lot of the groups that either were less professional or simply not willing to invest in their compliance infrastructure and so forth. So to your question, compliance is important, right? And so when you're selecting a regional center, I would start by saying, relax. You know, the majority of the remaining players are good players. I would gravitate towards groups that are focused on best of breed. What I mean by that is groups that are using best of breed immigration attorneys, best of breed securities attorneys, best of breed fund administrators, not skimping on cost, et cetera. That's obviously important. But this reauthorization has now also introduced the idea of audits. The USCIS is auditing regional centers. So those regional centers that are preparing for that are doing mock audits, hiring groups to perform mock audits so that they're ready if and when the USCIS knocks on the door. All of these things obviously benefit the investors, right? I think you can take a lot more comfort today than ever before. But I would leave you with the best of breed idea, and this is true, of course, when you're selecting projects too, which I suppose we will get to. Look for groups that are taking the long way, that are taking the slow way, and that are willing to invest.
You said they knock on the door. How often do they knock on the door to audit?
Well, they have started. There's a number of regional centers that have been audited, have been through it. And by the way, CMB being one. If you are well prepared and if you have a solid compliance culture, compliance department, good processes and procedures. In our case, we've already had our immigration law firm and our securities law firm do mock audits on us. In our particular case, we are already heavily regulated because our organization is what's called an economic development corporation. We were founded in the 1950s. And we've been audited we are audited annually by 8 state and federal agencies and banking commissions as a matter of course. So there's a certain amount of getting used to that, but it can be painful. And I think that, once you're prepared, it's easy. But I think it's something that is going to catch certain groups off guard, and obviously you want to be prepared.
Yes, and it is important because it protects the investors
Absolutely.
And it protects the United States as well. Very good. Rhea, moving on to you. Let's talk about how important it is to choose the right project and what should investors look for in selecting a project.
As all my other fellow panelists just mentioned that, post-2022, there's been, this program has sort of been an investors program much more, and it's become very investor friendly. So post-2022, what happened is regional centers started having different kinds of projects that would sort of cater to all kinds of needs. So starting with rural projects, this was something that came up post-2022 to essentially help investors get their processing timelines go much, much faster than what it is already. So when we're looking at project selection, regional centers are looking at the projects which are anywhere between 3 to 5 year project terms. We're looking at working with developers that have done EB5 projects in the past, know that there's going to be a definite well-planned exit strategy because this is an investment program. So when you're putting in your hard-earned $800,000, it's very important to see that apart from just getting the green card, investors are also being able to get a proper exit from this project and get their funds back on time. So anywhere between 3 to 5 years is what the industry has moved towards.
Okay, and say an investor comes to your center, how many projects do you present to them?
For EB5 Capital, through a year, we have different kinds of projects that are available.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. No.
Sorry, no problem.
Okay.
So with EB5 Capital, we have different projects that are available through the year. We have high unemployment projects, we have rural projects, and anywhere between 4 to 5 projects in a year we raise. So we typically look at small to medium sized raises that we, sort of are able to raise within a year's time.
Okay. And you mentioned that there are specific regions and specific areas where
Correct.
you lead them towards.
Yes,
right?
going back to what was asked to Akshat earlier, a regional center is essentially a license that companies like ourselves hold to sort of be able to have projects in those areas that are governed by the USCIS, the governing body that looks at the EB5 program. So we have licenses that are provided to us by USCIS to raise funds in areas across the US. As of now, EB5 Capital has licenses for across the US, and we raise funds in projects from all over the US.
And does the investor, can he invest in an already existing project, or does it have to be his own project?
Sometimes, in almost all the times rather, we try to have investors invest into projects that have started with its construction.
Okay.
So it's gotten all its permits and the construction has started. So then we start raising funds from our investors.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. Abhishek, I'm going to jump to you and skip our questions for Ignacio for the time being. I would like to ask you, what are some of the realistic expectations for returns on an EB5 investment?
Before I answer that, let me thank the gentleman for the grand introduction. I really liked it. The introduction for all of us, it was really grand and we really enjoyed it. It peps up the mood when somebody introduces you like that. So thank you so much, sir, for that.
I think he's just stepped out, so we can thank him when he gets back.
So you can pass that on to him. That we mentioned that during the panel. To answer your question, I'll take some time to answer that. Usually I'm very blunt on that, but every investment that a person makes in their life, there's a goal attached to it. Now, the first question that you should ask, why am I doing this? When you are putting in so much of money, technically at risk, to obtain a green card. So the actual return of your investment is the green card. And you should look into your own life, why that is important for you. There can be so many different reasons. That is a life-changing opportunity for a family,
yes,
or an individual, or a student who's just thinking the entire life, planning the entire life in the US.
So that would be the ultimate goal.
Absolutely, and that's really, really very important, and that's a very big ROI if you will ask me. Ask some people, depending on their country of birth, they are waiting in line from years and years. For them, getting a green card is really, really very important. Now let's talk about the money part of it, because that's what I hear, that's what majorly people ask, that how much money I'll make. You're not going to make any money. If that's what your intentions are, do not do EB5. I'm being very blunt on that. You cannot make money in EB5. You're going to lose money in EB5. How? You will have to pay on top of $800,000 that you invest, which technically you should get back after your loan term is over. But apart from that, you will have to pay the attorney, you will have to pay an administration fees, you will have to pay USCIS filing fees. So technically, you will be paying a lot more than $800,000, than that. So return of investment in terms of monetary-wise, money-wise, is going to be low, because the ultimate goal for your investment is your green card, and which is, guys, very important and a very, very exclusive things to have for many people on this earth.
Okay, but if we're going to look at dollar value and return on investment, can we talk about that?
It can range, depending on the project to project, it can range from somewhere around 0.25% to 1.5, 2% per annum, depending on the project you go ahead with. I don't even mention it when I'm talking to investors, because this is very minimum. And frankly speaking, that shouldn't be a criteria for choosing a project. If you're doing that, that's the very first mistake and very big mistake you're making in your investment journey for a green card.
Okay, thank you, Abhishek. Rhea, I know you wanted to add something about that return on investment.
Abhishek correctly said, this is an investment through which you get your green card. So there is absolutely nothing that an investor should expect apart from just the green card. Typically, regional centers wouldn't give anything more than 0.5% or a little over 0.5%. But it's essentially important for us to understand that it's a program that is curated for investors to get a green card. And the $800,000 should be looked at like an opportunity cost for the green card.
Very good. Yes, please, go ahead.
And I'm going to say pretty much the same thing as has just been said, but saying it slightly differently. Focus on safety, right? Obviously, your number one priority is to get the green card, but your number two priority is to get your money back. If someone is offering you more than the standard premium, right? All the premium projects are paying about the same that has been mentioned. 0.25%, 0.5%. If someone's out there saying, hey, I'll give you 3%, by the way, 3% is not very sexy, but it comes with significantly more risk that's embedded. You have to ask yourself, why are they giving me 3% if the guy over here is giving me 0.5%, right? Well, it's because he's either having a hard time fundraising or there's some other embedded risk. So don't go down that road. Stick with the absolutely lowest risk. That should be your priority throughout this process.
Okay, and beyond the green card, one can also apply for citizenship, correct? And how long after would that be?
Absolutely, yes. You
What
want
is
me to
the
explain the
time
process
frame?
of
Yes.
doing?
Yes,
So
go
once
ahead.
you have the permanent green card with you, and you have spent 5 years on a trot in the US after getting your conditional green card, minimum 183 days per year, then you become eligible to apply for citizenship. And you can do that the green card comes for a lifetime. Every 10 years you need to renew that. But whenever you are in a situation to do that, what I just said, you can apply for citizenship.
Okay, thank you. Ignacio, let us talk about the laws that investors need to abide by for the EB5.
The EB5 program, I think. Yes, I do.
Try again, Ignacio.
Yeah, the EB5 program, I think, is more popular than ever since the 2022 amendments to the legislation. And I think the comments of the panel, and it is a very, very experienced, learned panel here. I value tremendously the comments from the regional centers.
Can you hear in the back?
Because they demonstrate key features of the program for investors. Number one, verification of the regional centers' operations. Tremendously innovative on the part of the Immigration Service. These regional centers are highly dedicated to complying with that. Number two, project approvals created by this new legislation as a mandatory requirement for their review.
Sorry, can we fix the speaker? Perhaps it's...
Mandatory approval of regional center projects, which means that the project that you're investing into is being scrutinized top to bottom by the U.S. Immigration Service. And that is novel. It was optional in the past, mandatory in the present. It also has a key benefit in terms of visa processing, which was briefly mentioned, but it is an incredibly innovative and helpful feature of the new program. Once the U.S. Immigration Service reviews and approves a project, the Immigration Service will not ask the individual investor to, again, demonstrate that the project qualifies for them, but rather they will skip the project part of the review, assume that it is correct, and only focus on the individual investor's role, which is this investor somebody who can trace the capital that they're investing? Do they have any kind of exclusion from the U.S. immigration? For example, do they have a problem in their immigration history? But the real issue of the EB5 program for investors really is source of funds and project selection. Because as anybody who's ever invested in any mutual fund or similar type of investment will tell you, go with high quality companies, but every investment is its own universe. You have to look at the investment that's in front of you. These reputable regional centers go through several projects a year, as Rhea mentioned, and as all of these other regional centers typically engage in, which means that go to a good company that knows what it's doing, but look closely at the project that's actually being offered for compliance with your investment goals, okay? And then the second part that I mentioned is actually the one thing that is the highest reason for visa denial, visa refusal. It's sources of funds of the capital invested in the United States. It is not projects. So in that sense, these reputable companies that are in front of you do their job okay. The issue, unfortunately, is that immigration lawyers have to know what they're doing relating to how to demonstrate to the government the source of funds that is being invested in the United States, because that is the actual main reason why people refuse their visas.
So as an immigration attorney, how do you ensure EB5 success for a client?
Well, I have to say, I'm going to be boastful. I'm typically very modest, but I have to say that we have an extraordinary track record of success with our clients because we don't mess around. We tell people the truth when they need to hear it. Because undoing an EB5 transaction after the money's been invested is brain surgery. And I'd much rather have a difficult conversation with a good client up front than to have a situation where their life plans are upended because of lack of planning. So the one first thing that I tell them about source of funds is to be conservative. Don't take risk unnecessarily if what you're trying to do is achieve a visa goal with recovery of your capital down the road. So take a conservative approach. This is one of those moments where being aggressive, being cavalier, can really harm you in the long term. The other thing that I tell them to do is to look at the world of their asset pool and use the most simple assets that they have, things that are eminently traceable, obviously compliant with the US government's requirements. The last bit that is tremendously important is that you need to go with counsel that knows what they're doing. This is not the moment to go with a friend of a friend of a friend who says that they maybe kind of can help you. Frankly, if you listen to the words of these regional centers, they've all said that the requirements are high, that they hire experienced counsel, and they work hard to prepare themselves to comply with the US government's requirements. Your personal immigration counsel should be experienced. People that have seen the program evolve and understand its nuances, because otherwise you're really incrementing or increasing your level of transaction risk for the success of your EB5 investment, which includes two key components, getting the visa and recovering your capital.
So should an investor have an immigration attorney, or do the regional centers have their own attorneys?
I'll answer that briefly. I'm sure that the regional centers will also chime in. Most individual investors have their individual attorneys.
Okay.
And there's a distinction between the attorney for the regional center and the attorney for the individual. And I think that's helpful.
Sebastian?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably loud enough. I'm probably, hello. I'm probably loud enough even without this. So, first of all, Ignacio is not boastful enough. I would just add that it is hugely important to pick someone who has a lot of experience. And experience includes bad experience, right? The USCIS is incredibly inconsistent, and you want an attorney who is, faced a lot of problems, had lots of RFEs, and figured out how to solve those RFEs, requests for further evidence, notice of intent to deny, et cetera, et cetera. Just like you don't want to, someone who skis and says they never fall down. Well, if you don't fall down, you don't really learn how to ski, right? So the same thing is true for the attorneys, and Ignacio's at the very top of that pile. It's also true on the regional center side. We also have to have immigration attorneys. Some of these immigration attorneys will service both regional centers and investors, or they know how. We rarely use the same for both sides, but nevertheless, it's the same know-how, right? To your specific question, our regional center does not require our investors to use a particular attorney. That is up to the investor. We don't push them in a particular direction, but we do try gently but firmly to encourage that they use a top attorney. And as Ignacio says, don't go with your cousin who just finished law school and that kind of thing. This is not a place to be penny wise, pound foolish. Don't beat your attorneys up on fees. Don't go for the low-cost provider, just like you're not going to go for the low-cost heart surgeon. So, be smart.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Wanted to add one line to that.
Yes.
See, your attorney is going to be your first line of defense. And the attorney is going to be the most important person in your life for coming 4 or 5 years. So as everybody said, I'm going to use that particular word, that do not cheap out on the attorneys. Use the best in the market. Because the attorney might be handling, or the regional centers might be handling thousands of cases. but it is your one case that that particular attorney will be handling. So obviously, very rightly given the example of a heart surgery or anything related to your health, this is gonna be related to your financial health and the entire future of your family. So be very wiseful in that.
One last thing to add to that too. I mean, you need an advocate. So the regional center, depending on how the regional center is structured, will be looking out for you and governing the investment that you've made and enforcing the terms and conditions of your loan if that's the structure. Sometimes the developer might be in control of that, and that can create some conflict. Similarly, if you're working with a regional center that's requiring that you use a very specific attorney and that's the only choice you have, that you really got to do your due diligence on those sorts of things because there can be conflict there too. You need someone who's going to look after your interests and who can challenge the regional center if there are things that don't go right. So that was a great point Sebastian made about bad experiences is also important. What do they do if there are things that aren't going as smoothly as what they could be? How do they react? Do they have experience in dealing with challenges?
So Matt, do you have your own attorneys or do you outsource to law firms?
Similarly to Sebastian,
Okay.
we let the investor pick their own attorney.
Okay.
So now we do, just as he mentioned, strongly recommend they go with somebody with experience. If they absolutely choose to go with somebody that doesn't have as much experience, we'll recommend co-counsel or we'll require co-counsel in certain situations. And then similarly, if they're going with somebody who we clearly know has had issues or violations, we feel it's our responsibility to tell them that as well.
Right. Go ahead, Akshat.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the beauty about the EB5 visa program for an investor is you make the choice, right from the start till the very end. So you make the choice of filing an EB5, you select your attorney, you select your project, your regional center, and like as everyone else said, there are recommendations made by a regional center just because as much as an attorney would like an investor to get their green card, so do we. Because at the end of the day, all of us sitting here want our investors to get their green card, want them to be happy at the end of the day and get their money back. So certainly if there's someone who's come to us for a recommendation, we'd be happy to do that. But if an investor says, I am working with a particular attorney, it's always a welcome decision.
Okay. And Ignacio mentioned what he believes is most of the time, I'll say the pitfalls, right? What do you think are some of the pitfalls that lead to not getting the green card, getting denied? Anyone can answer
Yeah,
this. Go
so
ahead.
Ignacio already touched on it. So one of the things is source of funds. I mean, everyone needs to be really aware of that. Don't cheap out on the groups that are going to be helping you prepare that. The attorney who's got knowledge and the best way in which to go about putting that information together. Just be very careful with source of funds. Path of funds can also be important. The government wants to know that you're moving funds into the country in a lawful way and that the funds are coming from a lawful source. So that's the biggest reason why we see individual investor denials. As far as the projects are concerned, we've been very fortunate. We've taken on over 90 individual EB5 investments. We've never had a project denial. It can happen. There are, even to good groups, you can have project denials. So you really have to be careful in making sure that you understand what you're investing into, that they're not using unique or untested structures or things like that. If you're going with somebody who's got a long history and track record, it's a very low probability that you're going to get a project denial. The last way you can lose out on the program is ending up in a situation where you're going to file your final petition to demonstrate to the government that the jobs were actually created and the project didn't get built. So you've got to be very mindful of not only the track record of the regional center, but the developer they're working with. How is the investment structured? Are there protections in place to make sure that the project gets built? Is it fully capitalized up front? In this current environment, we're seeing a lot of people take on really unique structures. We're seeing regional centers that wouldn't normally cut corners in how the projects are being financed. We're seeing people move forward without construction loans. And it's crazy in this day and age, because we've seen scenarios in which those don't work out. And so the biggest challenge you have there is you don't finish the entire capital structure and the project doesn't get built. You go to that final stage where you have to prove to the government that the job creation took place, and you go in empty-handed. The penalty for that is you go home. You're uprooted. Everything that you established in the United States, maybe you've moved your family there, you've put your kids in school, you've started a small business,
Okay. So source of funds, path of funds, any other reasons why my
Yes.
EB5 visa request would get rejected?
Oh, sorry, I was trying to add to
Ah,
what...
yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So the thing is that, whatever she just mentioned, Matt, those are all fixed things. You can definitely go ahead and look into different documentation, look into different, verbatim, and you can know all that. But there are other pitfalls as well. Like, don't let anybody else choose a project for you. Don't let anybody else choose a regional center for you. There are many, it's a huge market, and there are many intermediaries in between who will try and say that this is the best project, that's the best project. No. Think of it that you are starting your own business, and how much concentration, how much time you will put in, how much research you will do in just finalizing what exactly you're going to do. Do the exact same thing in this particular investment. So your choice has to be, you need to choose that thing. You cannot just listen to somebody, this is the best, that is the best. No. It's a very, very slippery industry. You do not get an unbiased advice from anywhere. We from the regional centers, we give you, we are directly trying to sell you a project. So we have our intentions pretty much right there. But there will be people in that who will not show you or take you towards the best project. They will take you to the project which pays them the best. So ultimately, it is on you to do a very, very good research and figure out a good project for yourself which fulfills all your needs.
I just had a simple point. As they say in sport, past success doesn't guarantee future results. So obviously, when you look at a regional center, you would love to see the track record. You'd love to see how they've done in the past. But your individual immigration petition success is completely dependent on the project that you're investing in. Because your money is going to come back from that particular project. If that particular project doesn't finish construction, doesn't create jobs, you're not getting your green card. So track record obviously is very important. But as investors, when they're doing their due diligence, they need to see what is the kind of project. Is it good enough to be able to create those kind of cash flows so that the money can come back? Rest assured, anyone, all the regional centers sitting here, we've done this enough and more times to know what's the right intent for the investor and how can we safeguard their interests so that there are two main considerations, which is getting the green card and getting the money back is taken care of.
So how do we protect the investor's capital?
As a regional center?
Yes.
So there are obviously various metrics as a regional center that we would want to take. As we discussed earlier, first and foremost, finding the right project. When you're looking for the right project, you're looking for the right developer. If you're working with a developer which has already done EB5 in the past, then it's obviously a big surplus because partnering or investing in a real estate project is one, but getting cooperation from the developer in terms of documentation, job creation reports, construction spendings, transparency is something, it's a different game altogether.
And Ignacio, do we have legal recourse, say in case of fraud or project failure?
Well, those are two very different things. Because
Yes.
fraud is really a significant matter. Obviously, the main regulatory agency, the Immigration Service, will be heavily scrutinizing any project that has any air of fraudulent actions. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission is also very active at policing offerings of securities. These are not lightweight agencies. They use the entire authority and weight of the U.S. government to look at every document and analyzing. This is a very serious matter. In the hands of investors, the new legislation created certain improvements to the previous rules that allow investors to move from a problematic project to a new investment. That doesn't exempt investors from the duty to maintain their investment or perhaps even to make a new investment, but it did offer a solution to those families that are faced with a situation where there's something wrong with the project that they didn't create. And it is very much written in that way. If the problem is not you, but the project, we will find a way to let you move to another one. However, there's another thing called project failure. That means that the regional center did everything right, but things didn't work out. Now, we've all lived through this horrible time called the COVID pandemic. Well, we know for a fact that it had severe economic consequences throughout the world, including the United States. Good projects encountered serious problems during the COVID pandemic in the United States. And we ended up with a very quirky situation where the industry saw problems have in relation to recovery of capital, but compliance with the job creation requirements of the program. Meaning investors, without doing anything differently, are able to move forward with their visa process, but will indeed have problems recovering their capital because the project didn't work out in the way that it was planned. And that brings to light one of the core foundational concepts of the program. It was set in motion in the very initial legislation from 1990. It's called the at-risk requirement of the EB5 program. You have to go back to 1990. The Canadian investor immigration program was very popular at that time. And the Canadian program was essentially a deposit of cash to a chartered bank in Canada, and the chartered bank would then process the immigration loan to help the person become a Canadian permanent resident. The legislature in the United States said that's really not for us. We believe in entrepreneurship and especially job creation. So the two pillars of the EB5 program from the very beginning, at-risk entrepreneurial investment with the risk of profit or loss. And that means that you have to be careful in selecting a project because you could lose some or all of your capital. Even though you may eventually succeed in your visa process. The second pillar, job creation, that's the real reason why the regional center part of the EB5 program has become so popular. Because these very reputable regional centers here, are incredibly adept at achieving job creation targets. And that means that your likelihood of success in the EB5 program is higher through a regional center than if you do it on your own. That's just the truth. I'm not embellishing anything. So statistically, that is the situation of the program.
All right. Thank you very much, panelists. You've shared some valuable information. Let's open it up to the audience for questions. We do have some time to take a few. Now is the time to ask away. Should you have any question marks left? Or have we answered all of your questions? Everything is crystal clear?
If anybody has questions, I have a microphone for you.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Hi. So far, I'm really enjoying these conversations. They're very good things. So how critical is this 956 approval form for the success of the project? Does it really, so somebody wants to venture into this EB5, do they really look at, I only look at the projects which have this 956, or can I start with a project which is in the process of applying 956, and I can go ahead and start looking at the track record?
So to answer your question, it is very, very, very critical. There are two ways you can get denied. Either there's a problem in your source of funds or the project gets denied. So always, RIA happened in 2022. Now we are almost 3 years down the line. So there are a number of projects which are I-956F approved project. So your petition will get approved only after the project gets I-956F approved. And if the I-956F of the project gets denied, essentially you get denied. You will get denied. So it becomes very important for an investor. It will, when you ask somebody the question, what should be the points through which I choose a project, that should be your number one checkbox, if the project is I-956F approved or not. That's what I would say.
I'll add a couple of words. He's absolutely right. Obviously, it's critical. Without an F approval, your petition will not get adjudicated, and as a result, you will not move forward in the process. That said, just so you understand, from a practical standpoint, the USCIS does allow you to fund and file your petition prior to the 956F for that particular project having been adjudicated. And in fact, because demand is currently very, very high, most of the projects, by the time their F is approved, will already be sold out, right? So it is not very common that you're going to find a top quality project that still has slots when the F is approved, which of course creates a little bit of a problem for you because you can't rely on that F already having been approved. You have to take a little bit of a risk, a little bit of a leap of faith, so to speak. So what can you do to protect yourself? Obviously, you can look at previous Fs. Now, Matt mentioned earlier, of course, you can have had many F approvals, and that even a reputable regional center may still end up with the next one not working out. There could be something that the USCIS doesn't like about that one. But if they are similar to previous Fs, if the projects have similar characteristics, if the capital stack looks similar, if the involved parties are similar, if it's in the same census tract, these are things you can get comfortable with. And then also, of course, looking to be protected in the case of a denial. Does the project have a denial return? In our case, we call it a denial event accelerated payment clause. Everyone calls it something slightly different, but in essence, you would get your money back right away should that worst thing happen. Clearly not what you want, but at worst, maybe you've now been sitting in there for 3-4 months. You'll get your money back and you can start again, and it's not the worst outcome. Obviously, you don't want a scenario where the project gets denied, but they don't give you your money back for another 4 or 5 years, and then you get to start over. That's what you want to avoid. So just a couple of things to think about. In the ideal world, you clearly want the F, but if you can't, there are still ways to get very comfortable with a quality project before the F has been adjudicated.
So how long typically it takes?
There's one thing I would like to add from what Sebastian correctly said. There will be very good projects which have pending I-956F. So ask your, but you should be very vocal about it. Like, for example, when you are choosing that particular project, ask them if everything is going fine, if they have any RFE on that. What is the magnitude of that particular RFE? If there's an RFE is request for evidence for people who don't know about it, if there's a problem, if USCIS can't understand anything in that I-956F petition, they ask the regional center in the project about it to explain that there can be a request for evidence or request for clarification. So ask your regional center if there's any RFE on that particular project that you're talking about on the I-956F. And the regional centers should be very transparent about it, and they should tell you if there is any RFE, what is that particular RFE, what are they doing to take care of that. So these are some other important points I would like to add.
Yeah, I'll add just a little bit to that, and I totally agree with everything that everybody said. So to echo one part of it that Sebastian touched on, it's more likely than not that when you see a project on the market, it's not going to have a 956F approval. Recently, we've seen very quick adjudications of those petitions. We've actually been fortunate. We have one right now, actually. So it can happen that you'll have a 956F, pre-approved project. But I want to make one really clear distinction. That's not the USCIS saying that's a good project. That's the USCIS looking at all the requirements of the EB5 program and saying that you've checked all of those boxes in the way in which you've prepared and you've structured the project. It's still a prospective petition. So all those things still have to play out. So if you're working with an untested group or a developer that doesn't have a great track record or a long track record, if the project's not fully capitalized even, sometimes there's situations where USCIS will still approve it. You still have to do your due diligence on that project and make sure that you're in good hands, because that project can still fail.
Sebastian, go ahead. Final comment.
Matt's totally right, and I'll add just a clarification, if it hasn't already been made clear. There's a scenario where you can get your green card, everything works out swimmingly, plenty of jobs are created, but you don't get all your money back because the project doesn't work out. There's also the converse. You choose a healthy project, great economic viability, no problem getting your money back, but turns out it didn't create all the jobs in a way that the USCIS likes, and you don't get to keep your green card. These two things are separate. Obviously, you want both to work out, but keep in mind that just because a project is viable does not mean you get to keep your green card, and just because a project creates all the jobs does not necessarily mean you're going to get all your money back, right? So you've got these two things that you've got to focus on.
Okay, I have been given permission to talk politics. How do you feel the EB5 program is going to evolve in the next 5 years? Or 4 years, should I say? Anyone can answer this one. Please go ahead.
Are you referring to the new president of the United States?
Yes, I am, sir.
Okay. Look, I think I've been asked this question a lot on this trip, and I'm going to just shoot from the hip here. There are really only two things that I believe that the new president will absolutely do, and one is to make sure that his taxes are lower, and the second is to make sure that he deals with the issue of undocumented immigration in the United States, which has been going on for decades. He didn't invent it. He ran on it as an issue, but he didn't invent this issue. And I mean that sincerely. Obviously, that's a big change for the United States. But the president and the people that support the president, this new administration, they will change the immigration system of the United States. That is one of their goals. And one of the things that people ask me is whether, is that going to hurt, quote unquote, hurt the EB5 program? And I point very specifically to the 2022 legislation. I said, look, the EB5 program went through a real inflection point in 2022. And the legislation, which spans over 100 pages of details on what regional centers can and can't do, how visas are going to be processed, is unlike any other immigration legislation that the United States has ever seen. I said, if the EB5 program is anything, it's likely to serve as an example of what the Trump administration could do to other EB5 programs, require greater scrutiny of employers and require greater compliance with the visa requirements that are available. So I don't think that the EB5 program is going to be in any way impacted negatively. The only thing that I do say to applicants is to watch very closely the original what are so-called the day one executive orders. Executive orders are presidential mandates. They're not congressional actions. It's actions that the president signs through the power of the executive office of the president. And one of those executive orders is called the Extreme Vetting Executive Order, which was used in the first Trump administration, and it requires greater scrutiny. Whatever the rule is for immigration purposes, whether it's the H-1B program or the family reunification programs or the visitor visa program or the EB-5 program, whatever the program is going to be applied strictly. And there's going to be more investigations, and that means slower processing. You cannot do more investigation if you want to speed things up. Now, the EB5 program is unique because the legislation from 2022 created average processing time targets. And that means that investors and regional centers who have rather deep pockets, with great respect to the panel here, are not afraid to litigate to try and enforce those targeted processing times. They range between 120 days average to 240 days average. It's not a bright line test, it's an average. But clearly, that set a mark for future litigation action, and we're seeing it play out in practice right now.
Thank you, Ignacio.
May I just add a few points? I agree with everything Ignacio said. I'll add just a couple of different angles. One, we believe demand will continue to go up. Part of the reason is that the United States continues to be very attractive, right? But the other reason is that you have other visa categories that are more worried about what the Trump administration may do. So let's say Indian engineers that have H-1B visas. They used to be perfectly happy with their H-1B work visas. Now they're less comfortable. They are worried. So now they're switching over to do EB5. There's other people that are switching over to do EB5. So overall, I think we're going to see more demand. And so if you're asking what happens over the next 5 years, I do think we're going to end up seeing backlogs coming back, even in the reserved categories. So that's perhaps a reason to expedite your thought process. If this is something you're thinking about anyway, you may as well act sooner than not. I think as relates to Trump in particular, this is something that he didn't touch in the first administration. He, within his own family and with his own group of friends, has used EB5. EB5 is something that adds to the U.S. tax rolls. Generally speaking, a program that is popular within the administration, amongst other things that are less, this is an administration that overall is not particularly immigrant friendly, but this is an area that we don't think it stands, to be threatened. Now, keep in mind though, separate from the White House, Congress is the one that is going to be dictating the future of EB5 because we're coming up on a new reauthorization in 2027. We spend a lot of time, as do some of these other regional centers, in the halls of Congress trying to educate congressmen and women and senators' offices about the benefits of EB5. And I can just very anecdotally tell you, feedback recently has been extremely positive, which wasn't the case 3-4 years ago. There was a lot of suspicion in Congress that this was a program that was really only benefiting a handful of states. Now the diversity, geographic diversity, industry diversity has really found a lot of positive reaction in Congress. I think we're building a lot more consensus that this is a program that really helps the U.S. economy in the long run. So we're pretty hopeful that the program will get reauthorized in a positive way.
Fantastic. Panelists, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our EB5 experts panel.